The first time I realized something was wrong, my husband was standing across from me, smiling as if nothing had changed. I remember looking at him and wondering how someone could look so familiar and still feel like a stranger. For months, I had trusted him without hesitation. I believed we understood each other, that our marriage was built on honesty, and that whatever problems came our way, we would face them together. I never imagined that the first cracks in our relationship would appear so quietly. When we first met, everything felt easy. He was confident without being arrogant, attentive without making me feel controlled, and somehow knew how to make ordinary days feel important. We talked for hours during those first months, sharing childhood memories, future plans, fears, and dreams. He made me believe that I had finally found someone I could completely trust. After we married, life became routine, but I didn't see routine as something bad. We had our own little habits. We ate dinner together whenever possible, talked about our day before sleeping, and made plans for the future. We weren't perfect, but I believed our problems were normal. Every couple had disagreements. Every relationship went through difficult periods. I never thought a difficult period could hide something much bigger. The first change was his phone. He had always kept it nearby, but suddenly he became protective of it. If a notification appeared, he would check it immediately. Sometimes he would turn the screen away from me. Other times, he would leave the room before answering a message. I noticed it, but I didn't accuse him. I told myself he might be dealing with something at work. Maybe someone needed him. Maybe I was simply becoming too observant. Then his schedule changed. He started coming home later than usual. When I asked where he'd been, his answers were always short. Work ran late. Traffic was terrible. I had something to take care of. None of those explanations sounded impossible. That was what made everything so confusing. There was never one obvious lie I could point to. Instead, there were dozens of small moments that didn't seem important individually. One evening, he walked into the house and immediately placed his phone face down on the kitchen counter. A message appeared before he could turn it over. I didn't see the entire message. I only saw a woman's name. He noticed me looking. "Who is that?" I asked casually. He picked up the phone. "Someone from work." His answer came too quickly. I smiled and nodded, pretending I believed him. That night, while he slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling and replayed the moment in my mind. I hated that I was suspicious. I hated even more that part of me already knew why. Still, I chose trust. I told myself that if I started searching for betrayal everywhere, I might destroy something that wasn't broken. So I said nothing. But before falling asleep, one thought kept returning. If everything was innocent, why did I suddenly feel like I had to convince myself of it? Over the next few weeks, the distance between us became impossible to ignore. He was still physically present, but emotionally, it felt as though he had moved somewhere I couldn't reach. Our conversations became shorter. The man who once told me every small detail about his day suddenly had nothing to say. If I asked how work went, he answered with a single sentence. If I tried to continue the conversation, he looked at his phone or changed the subject. I stopped asking. Not because I didn't care, but because I was beginning to fear the answers. His behavior around his phone became even stranger. He started using a password I didn't recognize. He took it with him when he went to another room, even for a few minutes. Sometimes I would notice him smiling at a message, only for his expression to change when he realized I was nearby. One evening, I finally asked, "Is there something you're not telling me?" He looked at me with surprise. "What do you mean?" "You've been different lately," he sighed. "I'm just tired. You're overthinking everything." That sentence stayed with me. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe work really was exhausting him. Maybe the changes had nothing to do with another woman. I wanted to believe that. Then I saw the same woman's name again. This time, it appeared in a notification while his phone was sitting on the table. I didn't touch the phone. I didn't need to. The message itself wasn't romantic, but the familiarity in the way he had saved her name made my stomach tighten. "Is she really someone from work?" I asked later. He looked irritated. "Yes. I've already told you that." "Then why do you get defensive every time I ask?" "Because you keep questioning me." His voice became sharper, and suddenly I felt like I was the one causing the problem. I apologized. That was the moment I realized how badly I wanted our relationship to remain intact. I was willing to doubt myself before I was willing to doubt him. But the questions didn't stop. A few days later, he told me he had to attend an unexpected work meeting. Hours passed before he came home. When he finally arrived, I noticed something strange. He seemed unusually nervous. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Yeah." "Then why do you look worried?" He paused. "I don't. You're imagining things again." I said nothing. Later that night, while he was asleep, I remembered something he had mentioned earlier that week. He had said his workplace was closed that evening for a private event. Yet he had just told me he had been there for a meeting. The contradiction was small, but this time I couldn't dismiss it. The next morning, I asked him about it. He stared at me for several seconds before saying, "I must have gotten the dates mixed up." It was a weak explanation, and we both knew it. I didn't confront him further. Instead, I started paying attention to the pattern rather than individual incidents. The late nights, the hidden phone, the unexplained messages, the sudden defensiveness, the emotional distance. Individually, each detail could have had an innocent explanation. Together, they told a different story. Then one afternoon, I received a message from someone I barely knew. She didn't write much. She simply asked whether I was still married to him. My heart dropped. I stared at the screen for several seconds before replying. "Why are you asking?" Her answer came almost immediately. "Because I think you deserve to know what he's been hiding." For the first time, I stopped making excuses for him. I wasn't imagining the distance. I wasn't imagining the lies. And somewhere inside me, I already knew the truth was much worse than I had wanted to believe. I stared at the message for what felt like an hour before I finally replied. "What do you know?" There was a long pause. Then her response appeared. "He's been talking to another woman for months." "I thought you already knew." My hands went cold. I asked for proof, but she didn't send anything immediately. Instead, she told me that my husband had been meeting the woman regularly and had been telling her that our marriage was already falling apart. That part hurt more than I expected. He hadn't simply hidden another relationship from me. He had created a completely different version of our marriage for someone else. I couldn't accept it without seeing something for myself. That evening, when he came home, I watched him carefully. He asked why I was so quiet. I looked at him and said, "Are you seeing someone?" His expression changed for only a second. Then he shook his head. "No." I didn't argue. I simply asked, "Are you sure?" "Yes." That was the moment I understood that I wasn't dealing with someone who had made one terrible mistake. I was dealing with someone who had become comfortable lying to me. I told him about the message. He immediately became defensive. "Who sent that? Does it matter?" "Yes, because someone is trying to destroy our marriage." I looked at him. Our marriage didn't start falling apart because someone sent me a message. It started when you began hiding things. He became silent. For the first time, he couldn't find an easy explanation. I asked him how long he had known her. He said they were only friends. I asked why he had lied about where he was. He said he had been afraid of an argument. I asked why he had hidden his phone. He said he wanted privacy. Every answer created another question. Finally, I asked the one question I had been avoiding. "Did you tell her that you loved her?" He looked down. That silence was enough. I didn't need him to say the words. I already had my answer. He eventually admitted that the relationship had become emotional and that he had crossed boundaries he knew were wrong. He insisted that he never planned for things to become serious. I almost laughed. "People don't accidentally lie for months," I said. He tried to apologize, but his apology sounded smaller than the damage he had caused. Then came the revelation that hurt the most. He had told the other woman that he was considering leaving our marriage. He had apparently made promises to her while coming home every night and pretending our future was still something we were building together. I asked him why. He said he was confused. But confusion didn't explain the months of decisions he had made. He had chosen secrecy every time. He had chosen another person while asking me to remain loyal. And suddenly, I understood something important. The betrayal wasn't just about another woman. It was about every moment when I trusted him while he already knew the truth. He reached for my hand and asked me not to give up on us. I pulled my hand away, not because I stopped caring, because I finally understood that caring about someone doesn't mean ignoring what they have done. He expected another argument. Instead, I became quiet. And that silence was the first decision I made entirely for myself. After that night, everything changed. He kept asking me to give him another chance. He promised that the other woman was no longer part of his life, and that he finally understood how badly he had hurt me. He said he was sorry for lying, sorry for hiding things, and sorry for making me question my own instincts. For a moment, I wanted to believe him. Part of me still loved the person I thought he was. That was the hardest part of walking away. Betrayal doesn't instantly erase every good memory. It simply forces you to look at those memories differently. He asked what he could do to repair our marriage. I told him the truth. You can't repair trust by promising me you'll never break it again. He became quiet. I continued. Trust isn't rebuilt because you say the right words. It's rebuilt through consistent actions, and even then, I don't owe you another chance. For the first time, he seemed to understand that an apology wasn't a reset button. Over the following days, he tried to convince me that leaving would be a mistake. He reminded me of everything we'd shared, the plans we'd made, and the years we had spent together. But I kept thinking about one question. How many times had I believed him while he was lying? I realized I didn't want to spend the rest of my life searching for answers to questions I shouldn't have needed to ask. So, I made my decision. I chose to leave the relationship. It wasn't dramatic. There was no revenge, no attempt to embarrass him, and no desire to hurt him the way he had hurt me. I simply stopped participating in a relationship where honesty had become optional. The first days were difficult. There were moments when I wondered whether I had made the right choice. I missed our old routines. I missed the person I believed I had married. I even missed the future I had imagined. But slowly something changed. I stopped checking my phone for his messages. I stopped wondering where he was. I stopped analyzing every explanation. And I realized how exhausting it had been to live with constant uncertainty. I began spending more time with people who genuinely cared about me. I focused on my responsibilities, my goals, and the parts of my life I had neglected while trying to save our relationship. Months later, he contacted me again. He said he had changed. Maybe he had, maybe he hadn't. But by then, I understood that his transformation was no longer my responsibility. I didn't need to know whether he regretted losing me. I didn't need him to suffer. I didn't even need an apology that finally felt sincere. I needed peace. Looking back, I don't blame myself for trusting him. Trusting someone you love isn't foolish. Ignoring your own boundaries after trust has been repeatedly broken is something different. I learned that lesson the hard way. The betrayal didn't destroy my ability to love. It taught me that love without honesty can become a painful illusion. I once thought losing him would be the hardest thing I would ever experience. I was wrong. The hardest thing was accepting that the person I was fighting to keep was no longer the person I believed I was fighting for. And once I accepted that, walking away became easier. I didn't leave because I stopped caring. I left because I finally started caring about myself too. Sometimes the ending of a relationship isn't the end of your story. Sometimes it's the moment you finally begin writing it for yourself.